All right, it is the top of the hour, so we'll get started with today's workshop on critical thinking. All right, we're going to start by taking a look at what we covered last year. Last year we covered some of the course development fundamentals, and this year we're digging a little bit deeper into specific topics such as accessibility, DEI, and student engagement. Today we're going to focus on how to promote critical thinking in the classroom. All right, on today's agenda, we'll start with defining critical thinking and why it is important. Then we will share some strategies for assessing critical thinking, meeting students where they are at, and then sharing the faculty perspective. At the end, we'll have a few minutes to answer any questions that you may have. So what is critical thinking? Before we get started, please share what comes to mind when you hear the words critical thinking in the chat. I see problem solving and innovation, reaching your own conclusions, seeing different perspectives, asking questions, finding the why. Yep, digging in deeper than just the surface level information, following the evidence. I like analyze and evaluate, those high level verbs. Yeah, problem solving, thinking outside the box, making connections. I think analyzing the data might be one of my favorites. Yep, looking at different perspectives. All right, thank you everyone for sharing. Looks like we're off to a great start already about knowing what critical thinking is. All right, so I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Conni Whitten. She is the program chair for the FSBT BA in Human Resources Management and Master of Human Resource Management programs to share her perspective on critical thinking. Conni, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is a fun topic. I love all the responses in the chat box. Let me get rid of this little thing down here. Otherwise, I'll be distracted with the chat pop-up. So today we're going to think about critical thinking and what it is, how and why it's important, what it looks like during course design, and how we can measure the success of achieving critical thinking. Must critical thinking be complex, or can we keep it simple? So the chat was sort of like Google. I put in critical thinking. I didn't even put in what is critical thinking, and just critical thinking. In 48 seconds, over 2 billion responses came back. So I hardly had a chance to hit enter before it popped up. So the basic thing, and I think most of the chat alluded to the same thing, is critical thinking is you've got a problem, you're thinking through it, and you come up with a solution. That's probably the most basic. And when I started scrolling through those 2 billion responses, that was the core of most of them. There's got to be a problem, you got to think through it and come up with a solution. So the key words are analysis, exploration, solutions, decision-making, creativity, inference, strategy, mistakes. Mistakes are important when it comes to critical thinking, and synthesis. Okay, next. So why is it important to develop critical thinking? And critical thinking can be learned or it can be intuitive. Problem solving. Let's think about being stuck in a car in a snowstorm. Critical thinking might just save your life. A triage nurse makes decisions based on critical needs and critical thinking and a learned process. In the world of work, you never want to bring a problem without a potential solution. So once you find the problem, you're going to come up with some possible solution. It may not be right, they may not use it, but bringing the problem without a solution is not an employee that brings a lot of value to the program. If they can bring a solution for the problem, then they're going to also be a good partner with solving the problem. So these are some really interesting things. Learn critical thinking is a mastering a process, define the problem, research, data relevance. You got to make sure that what you're searching for is pertinent to what you're trying to answer. You want to ask questions. You want to identify a solution, present the solution, analyze the decision. And I would add one more to that list, and that is be able to measure it. If you bring something and you can't measure it, as Caitlin's going to share with us in a little while about our rubrics, you can't measure it, then you will never know whether it works or not, or if there might have been another route to take. Measuring doesn't always have to be successful either. Sometimes you want the measurement to fail so you can go in and make sure you're doing the right thing. Next slide. All right, so what does critical thinking look like during course design? So here is a discussion prompt. It was in one of our courses. Research and discuss an emergent strategy implemented by an organization and its success or failure. You would think that that would, encourage the student to do a little research and take a look. So here's the no critical response to that question. Amazon. They sold books. They bought companies. They sold other things. Now they sell more things than books. A more engaged student, one that has done a little thinking and research, says Nintendo. They started out as a card game. They risked it, the IT game world. They took a big risk in jumping in there. And they sort of used a blue ocean strategy. Successfully responsive since 1900s, the early 1900s. They have been around a long time. So this student actually learned something. The Amazon student sort of just made it up because they knew that they sold books and then they bought stuff and now they sell more than books. So when you are preparing your discussion questions or your assignment questions, decide what you don't want to see from them and be specific. If you don't want to see no Amazon, Netflix, Google, or any other organization that's really easy to identify and recognize that they actually made changes through the years, then be specific in your discussion prompt. Say, do not include Amazon, Netflix, Google, or whatever. All right, so you want to design to measure. Be specific as to the expectations, and that goes back to the Amazon and Nintendo. The rubrics can be structured to evaluate critical thinking. Consider the questions or scenarios that define the who, what, where, why, and how. Application, analysis, synthesis, comprehension, and evaluate your grading process. Does the student answer the prompt or they go above and beyond? Not everyone's critical thinking will be the same. And you have to identify that when you're working with your students, because you're going to have some students that are just going to wow you. And then you're going to have other students that may just get it. But that doesn't mean they're wrong. They have developed a sense of critical thinking, and you don't want to dissuade them from trying to accomplish it. Rubrics will be structured to analyze the critical thinking. And the tips, instructor guide or tips, can be found in the module in most classrooms where they have what you should be seeing in the discussion. They are giving you tips of what we want to accomplish. If they didn't quite make it distinguished, explain why or what could have been different. In my opinion, I believe I should always be followed with a credible source to defend the statement. And consider announcements or post first in the discussion room, sharing the expectations for thinking. So if you put it in there, then you've already told them what to do and how to do it. Okay. So must critical thinking be complex, or can it keep it simple? Keep it simple is sort of a safety and survival type thing. Seen, experienced, learned. Critical thinking is within reach. Emphasis on high-level skill will sometimes discourage students from trying. So you want to make them understand that whatever level they're thinking at, it's good, they're thinking. Now, the complex side, our ILO1, apply logic and critical thinking to evaluate reasoning, explore diverse perspectives, and engage in metacognition. Back to the triage nurse. The triage nurse must know the value of X because she's not a very good nurse. She can't go keep it simple. She needs to be on top of everything. Okay. So why is it important to develop framework for increasing critical thinking? Here is a high level that I also think that this can be used at any level with our students. This is a framework that will consider high level or complex. The process of keep it simple can be designed into the learning option because it's the basic pattern for what you want them to do. You want them to have clear expectations, so you need to provide those clear expectations and share the thought process. Give them a little clue on how they should work through the problem. Let the students ask questions, and if they're not, ask questions of them. And there again, you can put it in announcements or you can put it in the discussion forum itself. And weave in the researched evidence. Try to share your own evidence, but encourage them to share theirs. And then include reflection. And that, you know, this is one of the things when we're talking in the classroom to use, especially in the business courses, to use the scholarly or business language. Stay away from the first person and all the personal casual journalism discussions that you can often find in the discussion room.
Greetings.
You want personal reflection, but you want it to be professional, and you also want it to be something that they have learned from. So if they don't include it in their discussion post, ask them about it when you respond to them. How do you see this, you know, impacting you personally? Where would you find this type of thing in your life? So, okay.
Yep, I'll jump
Okay,
in
is
here. And
this
I'm
yours,
seeing a lot
Kristen?
of, yes, and I'm seeing a lot of good things in the chat also looking about the rubrics and being specific with the assignment directions. So here we're going to look at an example of an assignment that engages critical thinking. We have the assignment directions along with the rubric criteria for the MGT 490 Week 3 assignment. MGT 490 is a capstone course for the BA HRM program. And throughout each week of the course, the students are developing a plan to solve a human resource management problem or issue that they identify in week 1. Here in the week 3 assignment directions, they are asked to outline the financial implications, including the additional costs and ethical issues related to the problem. We have the standard rubric criteria for creative thinking, solving problems, which was specifically chosen to measure the students' critical thinking and developing a plan to solve the HRM issue and identifying potential consequences. So this is just one example of how you can assess critical thinking and measure it in a written assignment. But as Conni and others are mentioning, it's being very specific with your assignment directions, even using the sub-bullets to go further into your expectations to really clearly outline for the students what are the expectations in their writing, and then really assessing, are they solving the problem? Are they identifying the solution and looking forward and identifying those potential consequences? All right, next we have Jenn Zaur, who is here to share with us about meeting students where they are.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Diana, I was gonna say, I think we'll have to hit enter each time and then the boxes will pop up. So one thing that we know, right, is that all of our students are not at the same place when they come to our class. And before I started my journey here at UAGC, I taught in an elementary school, and one of my mentors who came to my classroom, who was helping to work with us on writing at that time with our students. I taught in a Title I school in a low socioeconomic area, and our kiddos really struggled. And one of the things she always said was, we have to always make sure that we're meeting our students where they are. And there's a variety of things that we can do and in our courses, both as we're developing courses, as well as when we're facilitating courses, that allow us to do this. And if to the point that Caitlin just shared, we can use the rubric that we have as a guide, right? All of our students have access to that rubric, and we can use that as a tool that helps them to know what the expectations are and what we're looking for. Something that I found with using a rubric to really help students who might be struggling in terms of meeting critical thinking, or really any criteria on the rubric, is if you take the rubric and you look at the content criteria and then you look at the performance levels within it, there are usually key differentiators between each of those levels of performance. So when you have a student who maybe is scoring as below expectations or is scoring as basic, and they are looking for ways to move from, below expectations to basic, or basic to proficient, or from proficient to highly proficient, you can take that rubric, and if you screenshot the rubric, you can help to highlight some of the differences for them between those performance levels, and really use that as a way to help drive the conversation with your students, and showing them, you scored basic on this performance level for this content criteria. Here's what we can do to help you move from basic up to meeting. So losing those rubrics helps with your trying to meet them where they are, making it concrete for them so they can understand where there's gaps to be able to help them move forward and grow. Another thing that's really helpful for meeting students where they are, and this one was something that really stuck with me with this particular mentor I worked with, is providing them with the language, right? Sometimes our students, whether they were the third graders that I was working with or the adult learners that we work with now, don't know how to articulate what it is that they want to say. So something that's really helpful with that is providing them with the language to use, giving them the tools, modeling for them, and setting them up maybe with some sentence starters or some scripts to help them be able to clearly articulate what it is that they want to say, and to be able to take and challenge their thinking. Diana, will you hit enter again? It should pop up the next one. Perfect. Closely connected and related to that is being able to model your thinking, right? Helping to take the thoughts and the language that's in your head and pull it out and put it down on paper for your students. So if you have a student who you're trying to push to be able to think a little bit more critically, model your thinking for them, and then ask them a follow-up question where they'll have to pull from the modeling that you shared with them and pull it back out. A strategy that works really well for this is metacognition, right? And is closely related. We know that metacognition is thinking about your thinking. So providing prompts, whether it's when you're developing a course, that encourage our students to think about what they're thinking as it relates to a topic, or also when you're facilitating questions, when you're responding to students in discussion forums or providing in-text comments in your papers. And a tool that I like to use, and I'm going to show you some specific examples in just a minute to help to do this, are question starters, right? Sometimes we need help ourselves when we're thinking about critical thinking, or we read a student's reply and we think, okay, I see where they are, but I want to take them to the next level, but I'm stuck too. And so some of those question starters can help guide us with how we're facilitating, but also they're really great tools to use, especially in those guided responses when you're creating curriculum as well. So Diana, if you'll advance the slide, one of my absolute favorite, and I'm going to put this in the chat, the link in the chat for you. It's on the slide, but I know you won't be able to click on it. One of my absolute favorite tools for helping to foster critical thinking with question starters is Harvard's Project Zero. They have an entire project website dedicated to thinking routines. And what's really, really great about it is that they've taken critical thinking and broken it down even more into more specific categories. So all of the different boxes that you see on the slide right now are different critical thinking routines that you can go to and find on Harvard Project Zero's website. They have some that they consider core thinking routines that apply to a wide range and a variety of situations. But then you can see they have different categories, such as if you're trying to get someone to dig in deeper to ideas, or you're working on taking different perspectives, looking at different possibilities of things, thinking more globally. And if you advance the slide one more time for me, Diana, there's an example of what you can see. So when you click on when you go to that main website, and if you click on any one of those colored boxes, it will bring you up a list of all different what they call thinking routines that are related to that particular category. So this column, the example of lists on the left for this particular one are all examples of different thinking routines that are in that general category. And when you click on each one, the picture on the right is an example of what you would see. So it takes that particular strategy and then it breaks it down for you. So this particular one, if you clicked on See, Think, Wonder, it gives you guiding questions. What do you see? What do you think about that? What does it make you wonder? And so I found that this is a really helpful tool when I read a student's response and I'm trying to help them dig deeper. I'll go into the website and look and find a different category of a thinking routine and pull some questions from that. I also I've used this a lot in course development as well, whether I'm trying to help students connect to their peers in that guided response, or just when writing their initial post too. Another example that I wanted to share in terms of question starters, and this connects back to what Caitlin was talking about with some of the Bloom's verbs in the rubrics and the directives that she was pointing out, is that there are a lot of really great resources out there that are Bloom's question starters. If you do an internet search for Bloom's question starters, you will come up with tons of them. And so what's really, really great about this and what I like is that generally when you search for Bloom's question starters, they're categorized by the Bloom's level. So you can look at what the Bloom's level is of the directive for the assignment for your students and then find some question starters that match at that level. If you notice that you have a student who's already knocking it out of the park, then you can find a question starter that's at a higher level. Or if you have a student who's struggling, then you can take a step back with your question level and ask them a question that would meet where their needs are before then ramping up to help meet them. So those are a couple of tricks that I think are really helpful for meeting your students where they're at. You can use them when you're facilitating, but then also if you're in the process of writing a course, they're great tools to use to help you come up with some of those directives and questions as well.
All right, thanks, Jen. Next, we have Dr. Frank Bucaria, who's an associate faculty for the BAOM program, to share his perspective on facilitating critical thinking in the classroom.
Greetings, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about the methods, the goals, and the outcomes of critical thinking from an instructor's point of view. So I started with that quote from Socrates. I don't know if you could all read it, but I can't teach anybody anything. I could only make them think. Well, I think that's so true. So at the professor's level, critical thinking is about enabling students to think and also equip them with the skills and attitudes and habits of mind, enable them to think, to navigate in an increasingly complex, changing world with adaptability, thoughtfulness, and commitment to continuous learning. I think that's the fundamental goal of education, in my view. I can make my students think. I believe they can learn. In my view, and I believe in a lot of others, it's the bedrock of teaching. So why do I say that? Firstly, because we can design activities that prompt students to think deeply, make connections, and apply knowledge. Secondly, we could also provide instructions to students' interests and learning styles, allowing us to support students' autonomy so that they can drive their own learning experiences. So this is really different from just transmitting knowledge as the sage on the stage does. We all know about that. In my view, the sage on the stage might not always be sufficient as a means to help students effectively learn. In my view, learning involves a deeper process of understanding, internalizing, applying knowledge. It's only through creating an environment to explore, question ideas that students can discover stuff on their own. So before I go into the next slide, I just want to touch on the idea that critical thinking is so very close to the related concept of good conflict. But it's really not the same concept. I wanted to bring this up just because as an instructor, I've experienced on occasion that some students might find me a little bit overwhelming if I'm not careful. But by creating good conflict, we can facilitate critical thinking by challenging assumptions and encouraging an evaluation of various viewpoints. Both the concepts contribute to effective problem solving and decision making. The one thing that I learned over time is to balance my proclivity to challenge the two students' assumptions in the threaded discussions and replace it by encouraging them to evaluate various viewpoints. I think that helps them gain some confidence. Diana's next slide. So as you can see, the different methods. So the questions are, how do I and other instructors accomplishing these methods? Of course, the Socratic dialogue, the discussions, the critical reading and writing. In my classroom, I tend to make sure that feedback in the discussion area by always saying something positive about their reflection and their arguments that they choose to make. In every student's response, I sort of probe, but not to the point that makes students find my methods repulsive. Although I do find that some students can find me a complete pain, and you know what that means. I do think that most students find my methods are fairly differentiated from maybe some previous instructors, and some even tell me that they do learn a little bit more. For me, it's really a one-on-one in the threaded discussions when responding to students. I make it my business to respond to a student's answers to my questions and then thank them for following up. So when a student follows up, the point is to continue the conversation so that they feel I wasn't just asking a question for the sake of asking one, but to instead help them develop their skills. Fourthly, I try to stress the importance of clear, thoughtful writing. In my feedback, in any of my announcements, I let students know that good writing will be rewarded and poor writing will be somewhat penalized right up front. So if on the first paper a student needs some serious writing instruction, I take the time to provide them with the necessary elements to show them what good writing looks like. So in many cases, their final papers do show improvement. I know that takes a lot of time to provide feedback, but in the long run, I think it's worth it. This leads to the goals, and it's all about getting them to go beyond just memorizing or just finding answers in the textbook. It's all about understanding what they are learning pretty deeply so that they are about to think on their feet, question assumptions, and help them explore on their own. The goal is to articulate thoughts carefully, clearly, persuasively, which takes time, and then ultimately problem solve, which what employers say they really need. And that is to find solutions to challenges. I believe that it's the most valuable skill in both personal and professional contexts, something that we all need to improve to really differentiate ourselves. Going to the fourth slide on the outcomes. Once we get students to think beyond the surface level and explore topics on their own, they should be able to develop some confidence in their own ability to make informed decisions. This is where we need to shine as educators, I believe. To sum it all up, the big outcome here is applying what students learn to solve real-world problems. It's not easy getting to these outcomes because it takes time to tackle things strategically so that students are able to identify a problem, gather information, define goals, generate solutions, evaluate solutions, select a solution, monitor progress, and then finally reflect. Anyone who has taught strategic management knows a little bit about it. And it's basically an iterative process. In my view, we need to take a look at the big picture. It's all about problem solving, and problem solving is a skill that can be developed over time with some practice and experience. Each problem that we encounter provides us an opportunity to refine our approach and learn from the process, just as we hope students will. Thank you so much for letting me make this presentation.
All right, thank you, Frank. All right, we have
You're
a
welcome.
few minutes for some breakout room. So Diana, I'll let you take the lead on that, but what we'll be discussing in our breakout room today is reflecting on what you learned in today's session. So you'll just fill in the blank. I used to think this about critical thinking, but now I think this. So following along with Jenn's question starters earlier, this is just a great one, just thinking about where students came into the discussion and where they're at now. All right, everyone should be back. So hello and welcome back. We'd like to take a few minutes just to share what you discussed in your breakout room. So if you would like, just go on and type in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to share what you discussed.
Well, I apologize, but I probably had the best room. I not only had one of the speakers, I had a philosophy professor, and Jamie and Jerry and Ron and Michelle. They knocked it out of the park. Yeah, Kate Jackson Johnson. Thanks, Jackie. Oh, Darla. So what I loved about the conversation is that it was really sort of based on how do we get students past that uncomfortableness with talking about their belief systems or why they believe or what are being challenged by it. There were some great ideas brought up just about structurally about our courses, which I think was wonderful. So much of the conversation has been sort of instructor to student based. And what does that look like instead when the realization happens through social constructivism with the students connecting with each other and making those connections and doing that critical thinking. And then also, what are those challenges that we face when we want to have a student engage with us and we're asking the questions, but they're pulling back, and sort of a question, a conversation on mindset and motivation, and how, potentially making sure that we're, like Jerry had talked about, really being a partner in the learning process, building the relationship, being vulnerable so that they can be vulnerable, because we don't want to just give them the answer when we're talking about critical thinking. So we kind of went in a lot of different areas. Like I said, I don't want to brag, but it was a heck of a group. But interested to hear what others have to say.
Well, I will say that our group was the next best group because we also had many different ideas about respecting our students, valuing their opinion when they do come to us with their research methods, and then introducing them to using various research methods that have been verified, using scholarly resources and things of that nature. We talked about social media and how that is something that is very prevalent in a lot of our student population's mindset, because that's the first form of resource they go to. And so it's like trying to make sure they understand using and the importance of using scholarly material and other type of research materials. And that was the basis of our conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. All right, so that is all for today's session. Thank you so much for joining us on our session on critical thinking. Not next month, but the month after, we'll discuss creating a community of learners in October at the end of the month. But please reach out if you have any questions, and thank you all for joining and have a great rest of your day.